We want to bring in conservative attorney George Conway now and special correspondent at Vanity Fair and host of the Fast Politics podcast, Molly Jong-Fast. She's an MSNBC political analyst and former chief of staff to the DCCC and senior aide to the Hillary Clinton and Biden presidential campaigns. Adrienne Elrod is with us this morning.
A couple amazing things happened this weekend, George Conway, but perhaps they're grounded a bit more in the fact that reality may be settling in with some Republicans. One, Donald Trump did not defame E. Jean Carroll this weekend. Pretty remarkable what $83.3 million lawsuit will do. And secondly, we actually heard a national Republican going out talking about the importance of juries. Instead of people like Marco Rubio trashing the jury system and attacking jurors and other senators, Republican senators doing it when things don't go their way, you actually had Nikki Haley going, I'm not going to second guess the jury. What a quaint 2015 notion that is.
Yeah, it's a few years too late, I think. I mean, this is what people should have been doing all along. They should have been hammering him for his misconduct, and they should have been doing all this and criticizing him and challenging his mental stability. And I think this case is actually not just this damage verdict is not just a verdict about defamation. I think it's a verdict about his incredibly distorted state of mind. He, as Sean just said, he was hit with this judgment in part because of his behavior in court and his behavior during the trial. This is a man who, as Judge Kaplan said during the trial, he cannot control himself. He could not control himself when he raped Jean Carroll. He could not control himself in 2019 when she came forward with his story and he lied and said, oh, I've never met her, even though there was a photograph that had been published already of them together. He could not control himself after he was president when he continually defamed her again and again and lied about what happened. And then he couldn't control himself throughout the trial when in the middle of the night he was attacking the judge and attacking Jean Carroll again, calling her a liar, calling her a whack job, and standing outside the courtroom and holding these outrageous press conferences. Now, he's been good for 4 days. We'll see how long that lasts. I keep remembering back in 2017 and 2018 and 2019 where he'd do something or say something particularly outrageous and people would say, oh my gosh. And then a few days later, he'd read something off a teleprompter and people would say, oh, this is the new Donald Trump. There is no new Donald Trump. There is no new Donald Trump, Molly. And now Republicans are forced to defend someone who just was found liable for $83.3 million in this defamation lawsuit connected to sexual assault. Nikki Haley, at least, is choosing not to do that as part of a new, more aggressive tack from her. But you wrote something for MSNBC.com over the weekend. E. Jean Carroll, My Mother, and the Power of Staying Visible. Tell us what that means and why it's so significant right now.
Well, I think that Donald Trump ushered in an era of misogyny and racism. We know this is true when he was elected. And women, of that age were really, these were the women who fought for Roe. And then they lost Roe. Not, because of Donald Trump, right? He put 3 conservative justices on the court. He even said he was putting them on to reverse Roe. And Roe was the great victory of those women, my mother included, age, was that in 1973, they were able for the first time to have this bodily autonomy. And it changed the game for them. And so to see this taken away from them, and then here is a woman Donald Trump's own age, right? Donald Trump hasn't been married to a woman his own age in a long time. And this was a sort of incredible victory for women of that generation, for women of my generation. It was that women, we matter. No matter what age we are, we matter.
Absolutely. And Adrienne Elrod, I actually, that's the first thing I thought when the huge judgment came down, this huge number, is that this woman is such a hero that she started this during his presidency and kept going. And I don't think a lot of folks took her that seriously. I think everyone is taking her seriously now. But let's talk about the politics of this, Adrienne, especially with the civil suit coming down the line in the next couple of weeks. I don't know how much this hurts Trump politically. I guess it could hurt his bank account, which could undermine him a bit. But how do you think the Biden White House should position itself? And then we'll, of course, watch Nikki Haley play off of this as well.
Yeah, well, I think the Biden White House, Mika, has been really smart about this. I mean, you don't necessarily have to get involved in a story like this. The story speaks for itself. And look, I mean, I think on a couple of fronts, I think, number one, this sets a precedent. So if you are, whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, whomever you are, that Donald Trump is consistently defaming, there is not a precedent set forward where, perhaps Donald Trump is going to think twice before he goes out there and ridicules you on the public stage. I think it's also important. I love that Molly talked about, how, women of her mother's generation and frankly, women my age too, this was inspiring for us to see on a number of levels. And I think if you are, I always talk about, Mika, the swing moderate voters who will decide this election, you're looking at this and you're saying, you know what, good for her. I'm glad that she stood up and that she did this and she took this step. I don't think the Biden White House really needs to get involved in this because it speaks for itself. E. Jean has been such a hero to so many women. And I think, again, if you're Trump in the Trump campaign, maybe you are thinking twice before you go out there and start defaming, innocent women out there who, you either raped or you have just consistently defamed time and time again.
And George Conway, really quickly, just watching Trump's actions in the days and weeks to come, he can't talk about, I mean, to what extent does the definition of defamation, continued defamation, include? Because he seems to be edging close to talking about this as an attack on him, the Biden DOJ, when we know it was a jury. Does that get him in trouble, or can he talk around it still?
Well, he's going to defame people. He's always going to continue to defame people because he engages in psychological projection. I mean, Joe can attest to this. He's always going to accuse people of falsehoods to draw attention away from himself, and because he's just he's an incorrigible, pathological liar. That's what he does. And I'm sure he's going to be back at some point talking about this judge and talking about Jean Carroll. Yeah. He's going to be saying absolutely untrue things about everybody because that's what he's done his entire life. And what's the good thing, though, about what has just happened is he's finally being called to account for it. And I think what we all need to do, and I think Nikki Haley, for some reason is finally starting to do it. I actually think the Biden campaign, from what I can see on their social media accounts, is trying to do it. We need to call out the crazy. We need to point out the crazy. He's had 4 years, he's had 3 years of basically being off the stage, and people have forgotten how absolutely, positively, mentally disordered this man is. And the more you talk about that in particular, the crazier it makes him. And I'm not just talking about the possibility that he has dementia. I mean, if he were a relative of mine and saying some of the things that he was saying and confusing Nikki Haley with Nancy Pelosi and saying that Barack Obama was president, I'd drag him to the nearest neurologist. But that's not really the problem with him. What makes him dangerous is he's a narcissistic sociopath, a narcissistic psychopath, a malignant narcissist, and has always been that. And one of the things that happened last week is that the jury saw this man for themselves just a few feet away, and they saw how sick and deranged he was. And that's part of the reason why he's got to come up with $83.3 million really fast, or a bond. And I don't know that he can.
Well, his lawyers certainly didn't help him at all. That's an understatement. But, he was coming to the courtroom. I don't know if it was for the press conferences outside, if it was to try to intimidate the jurors, what it was. But it ended up costing him a lot. If he had stayed away, if he had not made all the bad impressions he made and kept his head down, he would have, he'd probably have at least $70 million more. He cost himself tens of millions of dollars going into that courtroom.
You just got to wonder why someone would want that to lead this country again. George Conway, thank you. Still ahead on